Welcome to the WOHASU Ripple Effect podcast, a global happiness series exploring the science and stories that shape our well-being. Hi, I'm your host, Elisa Juarez, and in this season, we're focusing on transitions, those inevitable life changes that challenge us, shape us, and open the door to new possibilities. Through conversations with expert coaches and thought leaders from the WOHASU community, we'll uncover practical tools, transformative insights, and inspirational personal stories to help you navigate change with clarity and joy. This podcast is part of the World Happiness Summit's mission to create a global ripple effect of positivity grounded in the latest research and the shared experiences of our vibrant community. Whether you're starting a new chapter, redefining your purpose, or searching for meaning in life shifts, this season offers strategies to help you thrive and find deeper fulfillment. Thank you for joining us on this journey, and let's create that ripple effect of happiness together. And today I have the opportunity of having a conversation with Ellenit Serrano, business consultant and well-being thought leader. Together, we will discuss the importance of mindfulness in the workplace, emphasizing its role as a performance enhancer rather than a hindrance. Stay tuned for this amazing episode. Hello.
Hello.
How are you? Welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
Awesome. It's wonderful to be here.
Likewise. So my name is Elisa, and I will be the host of today's episode, where we will look at transitions from a mindful leadership perspective. And this podcast is super fun. It is the WOHASU Ripple Effect podcast, which came out of the WOHASU 2024 Summit in London. And you and I actually had the chance of connecting in London because you were one of our WOHASU coaches. So you were part of the process.
Awesome.
You came, you joined, and I wanted to know from you where you're calling in from today.
I'm in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, close to Miami, but not necessarily there.
Fort Lauderdale. Well, I am calling in from Medellin, Colombia, and I think this is a huge testament to when we think about the WOHASU global community. This is a proof point, right? Doesn't matter where we are in the world, we come together because we believe in the science of happiness, positive psychology, and living a more full and well life. So I am super excited to have a conversation today with Ellenit Serrano, who is a business and wellness consultant. And I am super excited to talk to her today, or to you today, about how leaders can foster a culture of well-being in their organizations. So in this series that we're doing on transitions, we are looking at the different aspects that people may have in their life when it comes to a transition. And this topic looks like what people within an organization can do, what they might be feeling when their organization might be going through a transition. So super excited to talk about how we can continue to balance productivity during this transition, and then also maybe learn from you what leaders can do to help their teams go through moments of transition. Oftentimes, as we've been talking about in this series, transitions may have levels of anxiety, of uncertainty, and of fear. So hopefully in our conversation, you'll guide us through what that actually looks like and how we can prepare ourselves to be better suited to come out on the other end of a transition in a way that is whole and well. Sound good?
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Sounds great. Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here.
Let's do it. Let's jump right in. So tell us a little bit about yourself and some of the work that you do, especially coming from the lens of transitions within an organization.
Yeah. So just starting with me, I just transitioned out of a corporate career in the last 18 months. I worked for the financial services industry for about 30 plus years. I worked for companies like MasterCard and American Express in a number of executive roles. And along the way, for personal reasons and passions, I became very interested in well-being in general, including workplace well-being. And I started practicing for myself and then bringing it into the organization as well. And so probably over the last decade, I've done more and more in this space. And about early January, I got involved with a couple of organizations, the Global Wellness Institute, and started working on one of their global committees for workplace well-being. And then I also found WOHASU and the World Happiness Summit. I was thrilled to participate in the summit in London in March. Oh, it feels it was so long ago. And then I also was one of the people that went through the certification program for the Elements of Wellbeing that ended in March. So, I have a diverse background, I would say, between my business background and my certifications in yoga and meditation and well-being. And I like to bring that all together, my whole self, so to speak, into the way I lead and the programs and offerings that I bring to others.
I love it. And thank you for giving us that background. So I think for our listeners who have had a corporate experience or a career that was maybe more of like a traditional role, like thinking about what that transition could look like if they're thinking about doing something different. But one thing I've been hearing a lot about, especially when we talk about transition, is change, right? So change is everywhere. Change will happen. I think that the quote, right? The only certain thing is that there'll be change. So yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about how you work with your clients and the people that you coach with around the concept of change and addressing it, especially when they think about their organization or their career within maybe a traditional career path?
Sure. So I think you nailed it, right? We are in a time of constant change. It just is happening faster and faster. And we are required to be more nimble and be more flexible and agile as individuals, as leaders across the board. That part won't change. It's just going to continue to evolve. So that's funny. So I think one of the most important things we can do, and the way that I have managed my life and I help others, is to kind of manage self, right? And find equilibrium within self, find awareness, find mindfulness, so that we can balance ourselves and then show up differently for others. For me, in my career, that was a very big impact for me in the shift. Probably the first 2/3 of my career, I didn't have practices or a focus on well-being. As a matter of fact, I had quite the opposite. I was burnt out before that was even a thing that people talked about. I was a stressed out mom, wife, demanding career, and I just didn't know what to do. I was ready to give it all up. I really just didn't want to do anymore. Along the way, for me, I found yoga. That was one of the tools that kind of helped me get centered and create space in the chaos that was going on around me. During the times that I practiced yoga was the only time that I could have singular focus, right? And that helped me. It helped train my mind, regulate my system so that I could take a step back and look at things differently in my life and in everything that was happening around me, whether it was with my family, my friends, or with my team and in the organization. So it helped me make better decisions with clarity. It helped my reactions. We're still a work in progress. All of us are. But, it really helps us to look at the way that we respond and manage that better. In the process, managing stress, increasing our self compassion, and thereby increasing self compassion for others. So there was just a number of benefits that I found that I think are many of the tools that help individuals find holistic well being. And then as leaders, in particular in an organization, I think we all have a duty, so to speak, to lead from a place of care for individual well-being holistically, so that we are hopefully elevating and helping elevate their personal well-being rather than hinder their well-being, which is what happens often. And when we do that, we create those ripples, right? This is what we're doing with this podcast. We're creating a ripple and additional communication and learning. When we shift our personal energy, we begin to shift the energy of everybody around us, and it creates impact. And so as technology is first and center more and more, and as we have more distractions coming our way, finding ways that help us regulate ourselves, that increase our softer leadership skills, become more and more important. And by the way, they're going to be the things that take you over the top in the future when technology takes over many of the other skills that you do today. You have to hone in on these skills that become increasingly important and help you be a part of the solution, not just for yourself, but everybody around you.
So I love like the ending of that was not just doing it for yourself, but you have to do it for yourself so that you can better lead and show up for others. At the beginning of what you started talking
Yep.
about, you mentioned mindfulness. And I have heard a lot of buzz about mindfulness in the workplace. Can you maybe clarify and define what that looks like, what that is, and why leaders should care and not think of it as something that's wishy-washy, but something that can really ground them and their teams?
Yes, I don't know if I heard the first part of the question completely, but I think I can answer. So there is still a lot of education, so to speak, around what mindfulness is, so that organizations can bring it in to their priorities more proactively and more broadly, I would say. I think there's a lot of buzz around it, but I don't think it necessarily has really gone mainstream the way that we need it to. So mindfulness is, and I don't know if I said this already, but it's really about being present and being in the here and now. As a yogi, that was one of the reasons why my practice changed me so much. It's about just being and trying not to judge, but being kind of the observer of everything that's happening, the observer of your thoughts, the observer of the screen in front of you, of this play that's going on in front of you, and looking at it just like that and saying, okay, what does that mean? It's that extra space that gives you the opportunity to listen. And as I said earlier, respond better. And I do think that people who don't have never practiced or haven't looked into what this is think it's maybe something much more esoteric. So what mindfulness is not, it's not these esoteric practices that take your edge away, right? It's not going off into the sunset or off on some mountain, and being alone. You could do that if you like, but it's really that practice, right? Of coming back into yourself and creating that space. And in fact, it's quite the opposite of what people think that it kind of hinders. It's actually a performance enhancer, and there's multiple studies and research that talk about the impacts of incorporating mindfulness into an organization. And it's anywhere from stress reduction up to 30%, increased productivity and efficiency up to 15%. It reduces burnout and anxiety and depression. And we know that there's a major issue we have with mental health today. And so this is a really, really important practice to incorporate. And it even increases employee engagement scores, another metric that we are struggling. We are really struggling to improve on a year over year basis across the world, I would say. So when all of these things come together, communication increases, collaboration increases, and again, it creates a ripple effect. As a matter of fact, there are studies that demonstrate that organizations that score well on well-being scores outperform the stock market on an ongoing basis. So there are measures that you can look at and should, and we'll talk about, what we should do in terms of bringing a real well-being program into the organization. But part of it is measurement, and you can measure and see results.
Okay, so when you do measurement, like what are people or what are these indexes looking for? So you mentioned
Yeah.
productivity, reducing anxiety,
Yeah.
reducing burnout. So love
Yeah.
that. But
So
how
a
like
lot of
how people who might be skeptical still of saying like, but how do I actually know that this is working? Like, what do those measurements look like?
Well, I mean, a lot of organizations, and again, depending on the size of the organization and the investment they put into these things, they measure employee engagement, which we just discussed, employee satisfaction, which asks a number of questions. But you can look at basic things like absenteeism, turnover. We talked about productivity. On the back end, you actually can look at utilization of programs that organizations have out there. So, are people utilizing mental health programs? Are they logging into the apps? Are they actually downloading and logging into the apps that we provide to help them with mindfulness and breath work and things like that? It's very interesting because some of these skeptics may say, well, those things I'm not sure if they're really going to help. However, we're going to invest in providing apps to individuals. We're going to launch these programs, all of these benefits. They may not even get used. If you actually look back at what's happening and whether the needle is moving, you can actually redirect your investments and resources to what really matters. And some of the things that you can implement might not require anything more than human resource and investment, especially at the leadership level.
So love that you brought up that piece of, especially at the leadership level. I'm thinking a lot of companies are going through changes and transitions, transformations, whatever the buzzword is, right? That happen and are maybe directly affecting team members, right? So teams might look differently. Team members who maybe were part of the organization might not be part of the organization anymore. So a lot of changes, a lot of transformations. What is the leader's responsibility really in terms of helping their teams manage or transition through this? And how
Yeah.
do you recommend they maybe think about this to help continue to support their team members so they don't get burned out, so they don't like they continue to find satisfaction in these moments of transition, continue to stay engaged? Because at the end of the day, that's probably what they need to be doing, right? So what would you?
That's what we all want, right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, the leaders want the employees to be engaged, and the employees want a sense of belonging, right? They also want to be engaged. So it really is a matter of partnering to make things happen. So we talk about leaders, but I think everyone is a leader. And so I like to look at the different kind of, if you think about an organization and you look at, who's at the top, then how you cascade down through middle management, and then you have the mass kind of workforce. And depending on the size of the organization, that will look different. What I've seen happen many times is an organization will kind of set up with their vision, their objectives. They'll incorporate narrative, and I use that word very specifically, narrative around care for employees, well-being. They'll invest in some of these programs that I just mentioned, benefits and so forth. And so it's there, it's at the top, it's in their mission, it's at the senior level leadership goals, and it cascades down to somebody's goals in a functional area, right? But at that level, I think we need the advocation. We need to advocate, which is part of what I'm talking about. But then we need embodiment. And embodiment means we're in the game, we're walking the talk. And so, we need education on what it actually is, what well being is all about, how you can increase your personal awareness and what that does for people, and what are the various ways you can participate. Maybe you don't want to be in a group meditation, but you don't have to. I mean, you can practice some self meditation, or you could take a walk, and you could focus on breathing exercises locked in a room where nobody sees you, or you can just be a supportive leader. But in addition to advocacy, there needs to be embodiment. That's critical. And then as you continue to cascade down the organization, that remains, but this is where I see that it breaks. And the larger the organization, the bigger the break. So we need implementation and execution. It can't, these goals and priorities can't stay on a goal worksheet with unclear metrics for success and accountability around them. So at every individual level in an organization and teams, you need to implement that as part of your team charter, as part of your team governance, as well as your goals, and then really have accountability measures. A lot of times what I've seen happen is, we talked about measures for employee engagement. Maybe an organization runs an employee engagement survey once or twice a year. Results come back. Out of 10 things, 2 are really bad. So they'll assign a team to work on it. The team is got a lot of work to do, and so this is an extra thing that they have on their plate. So they decide to identify a couple of people that are going to come up with some ideas. They vote, and they pick the top 2 things they're going to do. They communicate that, and then bye-bye, we're done. In 2 years, we run an employee engagement survey again, right? So there needs to be ongoing governance. It's got to be embedded. So leaders can corral ambassadors and people that really, really want to help drive this on an ongoing basis. You know, when people want to be a part of the change, you talked about change management, they're willing to participate, right? And then they feel like they are part of the decisions that are being made as part of these transformations and so forth. So it's really important in that middle center to have the governance, to work in partnership with individuals to align them against the purpose for the collective with their own, get to know them a little bit better, maybe build relationship, be more of a relational leader versus a transactional leader. And that may come easier for some folks versus others. I get that. I like to be a relational leader. but but it's having that awareness, right? Keep your one-to-ones. At a minimum, keep one-to-ones with your employees on an ongoing basis. Don't just speak about what's happening from a shareholder perspective or customer perspective. Ask them how they are. Where do they need help? Let them know that there's safety, psychological safety in the organization, that's the kind of culture that you as a leader and the rest of the organization is driving, so that when they feel that they're overwhelmed, whether it's because it's something at home or because they're overwhelmed with their workload, because somebody may have, gone on maternity leave, or there was a leadership shift and a vision change and they don't know what to do, they feel comfortable that they can come to you as a leader and work on a solution jointly, because they also, as we go down to like the final level, they also are accountable for speaking up, right? For showing up and for being a part of the solution. Everybody has to kind of play a part here, but it's in the middle, I think, where the biggest change in that change management can happen. And it's not easy. I mean, I've led change management organizations. It can feel sometimes that it's overwhelming process to do some of these things, and maybe it is. You don't have to go there, but maybe we could start simply by taking a moment at the beginning of a meeting to just settle. We don't even to have a breathing exercise, right? We just need to settle. Just pause. I've seen people incorporate mindful moments into calendars on an ongoing basis. So that's a really good practice, as long as you don't overlap them with other meetings, because you got to walk the talk. And you got to make sure employees feel safe that if they really want to go to a 15-minute meditation, because that's going to help them get through the rest of the day, that they can, and that there's not going to be negative connotations or implications around that, because you understand that that's going to make that person feel better, have more energy, more clarity, be more loyal, probably, because you're allowing them to do some of the things that they find important. And that's going to lead to some of these other measures that are really true hard measures for the organization. And I do believe that over time, you can see the result in those hard measures, in the productivity, in the bottom line, et cetera. Decrease in benefits costs, decrease in employee costs, et cetera. You will see those over time with consistency. If not, you're kind of just starting over.
So I love that. And I'm trying to recap everything that you mentioned. So I like your definition that you don't have to have a title of leader to be a leader in your organization and to be able to model these
Yep.
practices. And I love the ability or the idea that our team members from like a grassroots level can help elevate ideas that will help them show up better at work and prioritize well-being at work and not burn out. And I think, again, like listening, like, so the two approaches, right? So listening and really understanding what your team is saying, as well as being able to have the authority to make decisions and advocate for programs and spaces. So I think it's like that, the two-prong approach.
Yeah.
And I heard you say advocate. So you have to have the advocates within your organization that are speaking up, bringing in ideas of ways to lead with a wellness lens or a well-being lens through change. And then
Yeah.
Leaders need to really embody it. So what you said, like, you can't just walk the talk, you have to actually set the time aside, signal to your team that I'm not doing this, like that you need to do this, but that we are doing this together because we all need it, and really embodying these practices. The implementation, so it's not just saying we're going to do this program, have fun, like here's a link. Like, no, like we're going to embody what that looks like. We're going to implement these programs and see how it goes. And then your last piece is really measuring it, right? Is it having an impact? Are people
Yep.
actually showing up? Is it changing their lives? Do they feel better? Are they responding? And I would assume that if the answer is no, then we start again. We start that cycle again. Like, so what would be better and a better
Yeah.
solution for our teams? How would this work and better serve you? So we're not just doing programs for program's sake to say, like, check, we do well-being at our
Exactly.
company. No, it's like, this is what is actually working for our teams. And we can see them because
Sure.
as we go through changes or transitions, we are noticing that we still have consistency with our team members. People are still feeling like you said, like they belong, that this is impacting them, but they have the tools to be able to go through the transition or the change. Did I get everything right?
Yeah. You're a good
Yay!
listener.
I
Yeah. So
love
my
it.
acronym for that is,
I
yeah, AIM. So advocate, embody, integrate, and measure. So that's my acronym. And,
love it.
you know, there may be times where you said we begin again. Yes, we always begin again. It's a cycle. And
Yeah.
there may be moments or individuals who are not in alignment, right?
Yeah.
And that's part of the conversation. And that's fine. But that shouldn't be. What tends to happen is it's either you're producing and you're doing what you're supposed to be doing from a goal perspective, or you're not a fit. There's a lot of in between there. There's individuals have a lot of capacity to grow in many different ways, to contribute in many different ways. So that conversation is not black and white. I personally started my career in finance, did that for 20 years, moved into a strategy role, moved into an operations role, and ended up in a product management role. I'm somebody who gets bored easily, apparently. And then along the way, I brought well-being into the equation. It's a conversation, right? In terms of a career development discussion that you're having, but it's also a full person. I like to call it holistic success, right? How can we elevate that individual's holistic success, not just their career development plan? That's how you implement well-being into the way you lead. That's my perspective, and it'll be dependent on how much the individual wants, how far the individual wants to play, right? Do they want to talk about all of their aspects, or do they want to focus on just a few? But I think it's our role as a leader to probe and to demonstrate that we care and that we are here and we're willing to help. um, it's worked for me.
Well, and I think the piece that I'm also listening, so in transparency, like I was restructured out of my previous role about a year ago. And I mean, it's painful. It's a painful transition. But at the same time, I feel like I was maybe more resilient to it because I think it's almost just the norm. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but I
Yep.
just think we hear so many restructures and layoffs from all different types of sectors. And I'm speaking to the United States more than other countries, but it's more in my experience. But we hear it so often that I think that you start building that muscle of resiliency towards, like, it might happen agnostic of performance, right? And I think that's just the reality that we're in. And I think some of the tools that I didn't have this acronym, but I love it, and I think it's a great visual. But those are a lot of the tools and resources that I used when I was leading my team to build that muscle of well-being. And for me, it was like, take your PTO, right? Like, PTO is part of your package, take it and disconnect. And one thing is, I would model it by literally disconnecting. Like, I will not be answering emails, right? And I think that helped in terms of having that strong balance at work, showing up for work during work time,
Mm-hmm.
taking the personal time for
Yep.
personal time, and modeling that for my team so that they could also be that way, to not get to the level of burnout. Burnout doesn't help anybody, right? As a
Mm-hmm.
leader, having a burnt out team is hard, right? Like your team doesn't want to show up. They don't feel like they're not engaged. They're not inspired, and that is a lot harder to lead than having a fantastic team that is rested, that has good boundaries, has good balance. They come to work much more energized and open. So
Yeah.
and if the role or the career, that moment, that job ends, it's not a reflection of who you are as a human, right? It's a reflection of whatever is
Yes.
happening in the economy, in the
Yeah.
industry, or whatever.
Yeah.
So I'm
Yeah.
just thinking,
It's human centered.
yeah,
Yeah. It's human centered leadership, right? We talked about leading with care. It's a human focused leadership. That's what that means. Leading with authenticity and care for others, being an active listener, caring for that person's support and development, and ensuring that you're helping them be happy across all elements of their life and well-being, because then it's going to work better for you. You're going to have less change, hopefully, if they're more loyal, right? Then that's going to hopefully stop the cycle of change. I mean, it's gotten really, as you said, kind of restructuring is the norm. Many organizations do it every year, sometimes more than once a year. Not everybody understands it logically, and even if they do, once it impacts you personally, then you have to start with that process, right, of understanding what's happened and so forth. So it's something that we always we need to prepare for with the human-centered leadership, and practicing agility and resilience, being prepared, as you mentioned, for resilience. That's kind of like, I think, the two aspects that are the strongest in terms of the way that we show up at every level in the organization based on where we're at today and what's going to happen. I mean, I spoke with someone a few weeks back who told me she started with an organization at a senior level 3 years ago. And in the last 3 years, she's had 3 different roles and 5 different leaders because of reorganizations. Talk about, how do you manage that?
you manage it
How do
by
you manage that?
mindfulness. I'm just thinking, no, but it's
There
true.
you go.
It's true. I
Because
think it's exactly, yes.
you can only control, yeah, you
Yeah.
can only control what's going on in here with yourself. And
Uh,
so you've got to be okay with yourself so that you can then say, all right, what am I going
yeah.
to do with this? What does it mean for me?
Yeah.
What matters? How do I then, treat my employees? It really is sometimes, I think, so basic,
Yeah.
but it requires a very, very serious approach to governance and accountability, as far as I'm concerned,
100%.
which
And
doesn't happen in organizations.
no, and I think that's like, I mean, I said that a little jokingly, but not terribly, right? Like mindfulness is, especially how you defined it at the beginning of this episode, is like that sense of yourself and how you're going to respond, how you're going to show up, and having that separation between having 5 new bosses and 3 new roles in a year, right? Like you have to have that balance within you and that steadiness. If not, I can imagine it becoming really overwhelming and leading to burnout at no
Mm-hmm.
fault to the person you're
Mm-hmm.
mentioning, right? Like and
Right.
different approaches. This is happening to me, or this is happening and this is how I'm showing up for it.
Exactly. I love
Which
that.
it's a good reminder. So this is
Mm-hmm.
a great conversation. Is there anything else that you would like to leave our listeners when they're thinking again about transformation or transitions in an organization, and how to stay again strong, resilient, and keeping their well-being in mind?
I think the last thing I would say, I could go on forever, but the most important thing is to start something, and start now. It goes back to being present, right? I started my well-being journey as an ambassador in the organization I was with. I as a senior leader, it took a lot of courage to do that, but it was part of who I was. And I found other people that were also passionate about bringing this into the workplace. And what we found was that people just started coming to us, right? It started to grow because people felt that psychological safety. And so we were able to actually open up and see and be surprised, actually, at every level, people that were kind of reaching out and saying, hey, can you help us do a meditation? Can you do a yoga class? Can you come speak to us about resilience at our team meeting? Because we all need this. So that's my advice. It's start small, but start now.
I love it. So ambassadors, I like to say change makers. I wrote a book about it. So
Yep.
change makers, I believe change makers
Yay.
are embedded in every organization. You don't have to have the title of leader,
Yep.
as Ellenit mentioned, to bring about this change, to be that ambassador, to really do that grassroots or bottom up approach in terms of talking about well-being, having the support. If you are a leader, listening to what your team is saying, bringing those practices, embedding it into your organizational culture. I love it. Elena, is there one thing that you have incorporated in your daily routine that has helped really influence your approach to leadership?
Yeah, I think I may have mentioned it already. I started practicing yoga probably about 12 years ago. It was a physical practice only at first, and because it was like singular pointed focus. And when I came out of there, I was like, wow, I can't believe that I created space in my mind. Nobody could call me, nobody could reach me. It was great. And that evolved further to meditation practices and just, going out in nature and looking for moments of awe. And so I do start my day with just being with myself. Sometimes it's 5 minutes, sometimes it's more. And I do incorporate a physical movement meditation because that's my preference.
I love it. So if people want to get to know you better or follow you, reach you, how would they do that?
They can reach me. My LinkedIn profile is my name, Ellenit Serrano. And my email is also my name, Ellenit.Serrano at gmail.com. My website is in process, but I can happy to send you information on the programs that I offer around well-being and authentic leadership linked to yoga as well.
I love it. Sounds good. And I think if we can add those resources down below in the comments, that would be awesome. So people can actually put that into practice sooner than later. I love it. Well, thank you very much for the conversation today. I learned a lot about thinking around leadership and changes that might be happening in an organization. And for our listeners, if you really enjoyed this content and want to hear more or be part of it in person, we're actually going to be meeting in Miami on March 15th and 16th, 2025 in Miami Beach for our annual WOHASU World Happiness Summit. So hopefully you guys can join us, be with us, learn from thought leaders, experts, educators, researchers from around the world, where they will come and share their updates around the science of happiness, positive psychology, and well-being. And we just have a lot of fun hanging out in person. So thank you very much for joining us and for listening. Stay tuned for the rest of this season on transitions. Ciao.
Hi, thank you.
Thank you. I had so much fun talking to Ellenit. We bonded over both being from Miami and Latinas, and I absolutely loved how she shared her personal journey from a corporate career to focusing on workplace well-being, and I loved her AIM framework: advocate, integrate, and measure. I found this to be super practical for implementing well-being initiatives. A few other takeaways that I got out of this episode. Let me know in the comments below what you got from this conversation. So mindful leadership is essential for navigating transitions and fostering resilience, which I think is a point that we cannot ever stop thinking about. And that change is constant and requires adaptability, self-awareness, and mindfulness. And when we do this and we focus on our mindfulness, it enhances our performance, it helps reduce stress, and it supports better decision-making, which allows us to show up better in the workforce as leaders and as team members. If you are a leader, I loved how she mentioned that we should prioritize our own personal and team well-being to maintain balance and productivity. I think the more we maintain that for ourselves, the better we are able to set the example and lead our teams. And if we really think about creating a culture of well-being, that will really help us boost our productivity, our engagement, and our overall team member loyalty, which is amazing, right? When we think about how hard it is to find amazing talent, we must continue to invest in them to retain that great talent. And I think the last piece that I took away was really thinking about creating small steps of well-being initiatives and building on them over time to really lead to significant and lasting change. Again, those are just some of my takeaways that I got out of this conversation. Let me know what you took away in the comments below. Share this with your community or anybody who you think might need an extra boost on thinking around well-being in the workplace, especially during moments of transitions and transformations. Follow along for more episodes as we can continue to explore this topic. Thank you for listening to today's episode of the WOHASU Ripple Effect podcast. As we navigate life's transitions together, we'd love to hear your thoughts. What resonated with you? What's one small step that you will take towards greater happiness and well-being? Share your reflections and join the conversation in the comments below. Join us at WOHASU 2025 in Miami, March 15th and 16th to connect with a global community, dive into the latest research on happiness and well-being, and learn from world-class experts on happiness and social impact. It's a unique opportunity to come together, share experiences, and spark ideas that inspire positive change. Oh, and as a thank you for being part of our podcast community, you get to enjoy an exclusive 10% off your tickets with the code RIPPLE at checkout. That's RIPPLE. Visit worldhappinesssummit.com to learn more and reserve your spot today. We look forward to seeing you there and continuing this journey of creating a ripple effect of happiness and purpose. See you soon.